Hi, everybody. I'm Jamie Allison, and this is the Big Idea, Big Moves podcast. This is where we talk to people from different niches, different backgrounds, and we find out a little bit about what their success techniques are, a little bit about them and how they've got to where they are today. And we have a really kind of interesting, eclectic group of people that we talk to. And today is going to be just the same as that as well. So really excited about having the person that we're going to talk to today. Just before we get into that, a couple of quick notes. One, if you've listened to the podcast for a while, you know that Jazz HR has a relationship with us in that they are really kind of out there helping the people that listen to this podcast. They have small and medium-sized businesses that use their applicant tracking system. And as people are starting to go back and thinking about hiring and thinking about finding the right people for the jobs right now that may have changed over the last little while, then we really want to make sure that we kind of help you get in touch with them. So if you go to the website, which is www.bigideabigmoves.com, you'll see the information on there. Take a look at it, get in contact with them, and see if we can kind of help get some people back to work. The other side of things is Epitome HR, and they work on the other side of things where if you are somebody who has maybe lost a job recently or are looking for a job or maybe even a new direction, they can help you look at everything from your LinkedIn profile and do some career coaching, and also help kind of put together resumes that are successful, I guess, going into those applicant tracking systems. So that is on the website as well. So again, it's www.bigideabigmoves.com. Definitely something to take a look at if you're in that situation and get things moving forward for yourself. So today, really happy that we have Bridget Case with us. She is the creator, producer, host of the After Orange Slices podcast, but she's also the co-host and executive producer of Turbo Talk podcast and Turbo Talk Live TV on Twitch with Super Bowl champion Robert Turbin. So she's been doing lots of work there. We're going to talk to her a bit about that. And she's also been a sports reporter, and she does that now, but she also has been a sports reporter with NBC and CBS, sports anchor, journalist, and she was a cheerleader with the San Diego Chargers, and also made appearances, from what I understand, at the Rose Bowl, Fiesta Bowl, a couple of other big events as well. So really had a really cool career, and we're going to talk to her a bit about that today. But first of all, welcome, Bridget. We really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jamie, for having me on. I'm so excited to be on the podcast.
Yeah, well, again, you've got that, sounds like a really eclectic kind of background. I mean, you're at a spot now where I know we were talking about you've got a pretty busy, packed professional life right now. But before we go into that, why don't you talk to us a little bit about, how you got to where you are today, because that is a little bit of a different career path than some.
Yeah, well, it's so funny because it took me until I was a guest on a lot of shows like yours, great shows. Of course, there's been some podcasts here and there where, the interviews have been kind of funky, but it took me going on other shows and hearing that people appreciated my story so much and all of the things that I did, and that my background was so eclectic, to realize, wow, I have done a lot, because I didn't even realize that until I was at this point and people like you said something. So I'll be honest, it's kind of one of those things where you don't even realize you're doing something right until like somebody else tells you, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's kind of been the fun part of this whole journey, because I've been really down on myself a lot of times since I graduated college, because I'll always tell people like, college was the best time of my life. I was a cheerleader at Oregon. Like you said, I got to cheer in multiple bowl games. I cheered in a national championship, and it was so incredible. And then it was like, everything felt like it just tanked from there, because I felt like a nobody. I lost my identity because I wasn't an athlete anymore, especially after I stopped cheering for the Chargers. So when I decided to go out and become a journalist, it was a tough road. And I knew, I always knew that I wanted to be in broadcasting, but I didn't really realize that there was going to be so many different opportunities for me than just being on the anchor desk or just being in the field somewhere. Because I felt like a failure if I wasn't just doing that. Because as a kid, all growing up, I always thought that I had to follow this one path. I checked off all the boxes. I danced my entire life competitively growing up. I got perfect grades. I had over a 4.0, but didn't get into all the top universities. Then I went to college, I got good grades then. I was a cheerleader. I got my master's. I cheered in the NFL. Like, I was checking off all the boxes, right? And then by the time I became a journalist, I felt like I just wasn't doing anything right, and I was getting so many no's. My first kind of crack in the industry was an internship at NBC in Palm Springs, and I totally lied and said I was still in school just so that I could get an internship and just get my foot in the door. And the craziest thing that happened was just that all of a sudden somebody left and they didn't have somebody to cover high school football anymore. And I had been practicing so much repetitively, getting so many reps, that the main anchor saw me one day and went to the news director and was just like, give her a chance. She's young, she's hungry. And that's how I got my start. But it wasn't just like what I had thought, where, oh, this will be one job and I'll just keep building up from there. No, it's so not like, it's like a mountain range, right? It doesn't just go like this, up and down. It's up and down. And honestly, like, I'm so glad it's been like that, because I remember pretty early on, I had a really exciting interview at Fox Sports that I really thought I was going to get the job. And I had I'd been through quite a few interviews, and I thought I had it, and then I didn't get it. And that for me was like the biggest letdown. But it was kind of the biggest blessing in disguise, because then I went somewhere else and I just got all of my reps in. I developed into the person that I am today. And all of a sudden I just developed so many skills to do all of these incredible things that I think I would have been like, not like unaware of if I had just been getting the easy job, right? Or getting the exciting job right away. But I'm so glad that my path hasn't been easy, and I won't go into way more depth because I'm taking a long time to answer your question anyway.
No, that's,
but,
and that's exactly it.
Easy,
It's so many people that I talk to in similar situations. That's part of the reason they become, successful in what they're doing, is because of those hard times. It builds a resilience and a confidence that you might not have had before. And you had already mentioned there a little bit, is there were a couple of times where your confidence level was really low. How do you get through that today, knowing what you know now? You probably still have those moments. How do you get past that?
Well, I try to think back to my high school self. High school Bridget could not walk into a Starbucks alone. I was that scared and afraid and anxious. I had no confidence. I also didn't even think I was pretty. And not that I think I'm the most beautiful woman in the world now, but now I look at myself in the mirror every day and I tell myself I'm beautiful inside and out. And I tell every other single woman, and guys, you can do it too, but I'm such an advocate for female empowerment, that I tell every woman now, it's okay to tell yourself that you're beautiful, because I grew up and it was like every woman was bringing each other down, and it was just so negative. But it took me until I got to college to realize that, oh, like, people actually like me for inside and outside. But it which is like a silly way to rely on confidence. But as a young high school kid, you're so aware of like all those little things, and you feel like there's so many eyeballs on you all the time. So it took me getting bullied a lot to figure out ways to deal with adversity, and not just let things roll off your back, but develop skills on how to face the adversity, right? Like, because initially I think I had always just been like too kind and let people walk all over me. And I had to find ways to stand up for myself. And that is what helped me develop confidence. And once I started seeing that people were attracted to my confidence because they wanted to be like me and learn from me and be like, oh my gosh, like I wish I could, I wish I could stand up to this person like you, or I wish I could do my live shot as confident as you do on air. Certain things like that, I was like, oh wow, I really am exuding confidence now. It honestly, like, I again go back to that moment where I know I couldn't walk into a Starbucks alone. And now I eat lunch by myself alone everywhere. And I love my alone time. And I
Yeah.
don't have to rely and be dependent on anybody. And it's to me, that is so empowering and exciting. And that's really what's reminds me to be confident.
Sure, sure. And um, now you're in sports journalism,
Mm-hmm.
which I think, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's still a pretty male-centric
Yeah,
view on how things, are
100%.
talked about or looked at. Um, and maybe I'll just we'll start there. If that's the case, how do you make sure that you bring a different perspective to it? Because I know that's one focus for you. And then the other side is how do you personally be able to deal with that when I'm sure you run into it all the time being in that kind of genre?
Oh yeah. I mean, the amount of just disrespectful emails or comments that you'll
Yeah.
get from viewers, especially in television, that's really what prepares you for social media haters. Like social media doesn't even bother me now because once you've dealt with crazy people behind email, oh my gosh, I save those messages because to me they just make me laugh. But when it's somebody that you're working with, like a co-anchor or a male in the field that should be respecting you because you have that respect for them, and they say something that's derogatory towards you, or that they don't respect you and it's because you're a woman, that's the most hurtful part. And that just makes me, it drives me to prove myself more in the industry. I've had so many experiences where I didn't get the same opportunities, the same pay, like honestly, like countless times
Yeah.
because I was the woman on the other end, to my male counterpart. And it was super frustrating just because I wasn't taken as seriously, and especially on top of being a cheerleader. And the most frustrating part was that I would always try to downplay my being a cheerleader or being attractive. And I would like try to be less attractive at work and not talk about being a cheerleader, all of these things because I wanted to be taken more seriously. And later I realized that's so ridiculous because that's part of who I am. And I'm just going against, my true self. And I shouldn't be changing myself just to, try to blend in and get males to, respect me more. That's ridiculous. And once I started just being overly confident to the point where I kind of made a lot of men that worked with me afraid of me, that's when I knew that I really, you know, I was really proud of myself, because I know initially the hardest part for me breaking into the industry, which I'm very proud that I got through it, was that there are a lot of males that think they have power over you to make sexual advances or sexual comments. Um, Really, really inappropriate, uncomfortable situations that I've been in that like I'm so proud of myself for handling them in a good way or saying no to an opportunity because I wasn't being offered it for the right reasons, whether it was a job or an internship, or some kind of mentorship. And that's what's really frustrating. But the older I've gotten, the more I've been respected because people know, oh, don't mess with Bridget. Like she's not going to stand for
Have
any
you
of
have
that.
you seen a
And so,
change in the? I mean, you've seen a change probably in how people treat you. Have you seen much
yeah,
change in the industry?
honestly, some, yes,
Yeah.
some, but it's still there.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
It's
That's
still
not
there.
surprising, and
Yeah.
yeah, I guess I mean it probably makes it a little more gratifying to have the success you've had because you do know that probably in order to have that success, you've almost went through that much more, to get there. So that's something.
Exactly.
Um, I guess the other side is that you have really done I would say a pretty good job at being able to build your personal brand as well. And how did you kind of tackle that? Is that something you do methodically, or is it just something that has happened over time?
Um, I think it just happened on accident because I actually got off, well, especially if we're talking about social media and
Hmm.
Instagram specifically, I got off of Instagram for 2.5 years to just take a mental health time
Yeah,
out,
yeah,
a social media detox, if you will, because Instagram for me was such a toxic place. And when I was at my last job working at the CBS station, Eastern Washington, I knew that I just couldn't handle the negativity on Instagram. And it was the best thing I ever did,
Yeah.
but it did put me behind the eight ball, and knowing what to do when I was trying to like do things on my own and become an independent journalist and build my own brand. Like I was pretty clueless. So it took me doing a lot of research and kind of being forced to get back into that world. Because what had happened was I I thought I was lined up for a big job after my last gig. And I thought I was moving to another town. I thought I was headed to a specific network. And I had an agent that kind of over promised, under delivered.
Yep.
And basically it all fell through and I had to move home with my parents. And it was like that was a big confidence killer for me, just because I felt like, oh my gosh, like, is my career as a journalist over? I'm not getting calls anymore. But that was when I realized I was just sitting at my parents' house and I was like, I don't have any other option than to try building my brand right now and try getting my name out there myself. So that's when I created a new Instagram and I just started, I came up with a name and I just started building things, reaching out to people, networking with the people that I did still have in my circle, and just getting creative and honestly, like, making myself look cooler and more established and accomplished than I
Yeah.
actually was. It's like dressing for the job that you want instead of the job you have, right?
Yeah.
And then people respected me and wanted to come on my show. I was so shocked when I started my podcast how many interviews I was able to book. I was like, oh my gosh, all these people are going to say no, because I've never had a podcast before. And because again, like, I just started a podcast on accident because I didn't have anything to do. And that's basically how I built my digital brand. And I just kind of faked it until I got here,
And now
which I'm
here you
still
are.
not made it at all. But I'm just saying, like, I'm still, we're plugging along and I faked it this far. We're going to fake it less every day.
So, I mean, you've been in the traditional media side,
Yeah.
and now you're in this kind of non-traditional digital piece where you're doing things very differently. Do you find it? Do you enjoy it more? Do you enjoy it less?
You know what? I think I was afraid to say that I enjoyed it more because I
Yeah.
felt like that would mean that I failed.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do enjoy it more because I'm able to tell stories the way that I want them to be told. I'm not lying about who I am, or there's no barrier between me and the viewers or me and whoever I'm writing for. I've always felt like I was putting on this facade. There was this mask. And that to me was sad just because I felt like I couldn't be honest. And I felt like I was lying all the time. And also, traditional media is dying. Where are people getting their news these days? They turn to their phones. And so I had to make that pivot and realize that the future of journalism and media is in the hands of Generation Z and
Yeah.
all of us who are looking at a blue light all day. And I think, like, when I realize those things, that's when I'm really, really happy. And I know it's okay to be happy because, like I said, I think I was just afraid to say that I was happy and that I was loving it because it would have felt like I failed.
Yeah, because it is a non-traditional path, but it
Mhm.
will become the traditional path probably. It's
Exactly.
just you happen to be at the front end of the wave, which is kind of
Exactly.
cool.
Exactly.
And so, I know in your podcasts and your different thing is that you look for kind of the authentic discussion and and also show a little bit about what things are truly like. In order to do that, you have to build trust with the person you're talking with and really also the listener and everything else. How do you do that yourself? How do you get them to the point, like if you're talking to an athlete, athletes are used to exactly what you're saying. There's that barrier. You have to have a barrier. You have to have training thinking that you can't say something outside of a certain box. And how have you found that? Is it difficult to do? Is it different maybe because of how you are structured now too? How does that work for you?
Well, I mean, that's what's great about my traditional media training as a journalist is that we're trained to push and get the story and not care about your feelings. And
Yeah.
I do care about people's feelings, but you need to get the story no matter what. But I just try to think about people's vulnerable points and figure out what's going to make them comfortable, and try to like not take them back to, kind of paint the picture, take them back to a memory, a time, those happy places, like telling them that I'm empathetic or I understand. Maybe if I can't really quite understand what they're going through, but that they know that I'm on their side and that I'm not out to get them.
Yeah.
So I think that that's the most important thing, because you're so right. Like, people all the time are so scared. Like, I'm not going to say this. Oh, I can't say this. I can't say this. And then they come on, and once we start talking, they really start opening up. And it just takes them trusting me we start really simple, with like small talk. I'll usually chat with them for a little bit before we actually start the interview. I always do that. And just to kind of create that trust. And I try to use humor. I try to make fun of myself sometimes, or, show them how I've failed, so that they know, like, this isn't something where I am out to get you. And this is a safe space.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know if that really, I'm trying to think of what else, because it is a really interesting, because that's my goal, like, is to make them feel safe and get them to trust me. But I
It's
just
just
try to work on it.
yeah, like it could be just a dynamic that you create too, and it is
Mhm.
different when it's this type of an environment where
Mhm.
maybe they're not feeling like it's the same professional lights as you're sitting there too, and it is a little
You're
bit,
right. I
you know
think that's it too,
yeah,
is that they feel more relaxed in
yeah.
that sense.
It
Totally.
must be gratifying when you get somebody in that kind of position though, whereas for a long time,
100%.
I mean, a lot of people just don't see that, so it's nice
Exactly.
to be able to convey that to somebody else.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Like, just being able to have people like on my other podcast on Turbo Talk, having people like Felix Hernandez or Ken Griffey Jr. sit down for an hour and a half and get vulnerable and talk about real things. And I've never seen them, really talk like that unless they're in a really long, documentary
Yeah.
situation. But, it's like you only
Yeah.
hear the sound bites. And so, those are kind of the magical points for me. I remember I did one episode. This was like pretty early on in my After Orange Slices podcast. I did one episode with these two former college football players, and they have this incredible story about how they met really, really young, and playing a game of catch, and now they live a sober life together because they came back. I won't tell the story. You should go listen to the episode. But getting them to tell their story was really difficult because they had
Yeah.
never told it to anybody before.
Yeah.
They had mentioned a little bit to one newspaper, but I was the first person to break it. And it was hard at first. I just had to, break things down like you're talking to a kid, how did you feel? Or like you're in therapy. Like,
Yeah.
how did you feel at that moment? Walk me through, everything. Like, let's just get relaxed and not worried about the intense language, or or if you say something wrong. Like, I mess up all the time, and I just don't care about that anymore. And I think that's why people resonate with me, is because they know that I'm human and I'm real and I'm gonna mess up, but I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you, I know, have talked with and had some kind of discussions with Heather Monahan, who I've had on my podcast as well.
Yeah, I love her.
Yeah, and she really tackles that a bit as well, as being very real about mistakes and things like
Yeah,
that. And it is interesting how that allows you to have a much better, deeper conversation than you normally would. So.
exactly. Totally. She totally preaches that and lives that. She's my hero. I love her.
Yeah, she's a great guest as well. So you are doing, it's a little bit entrepreneurship, a little bit kind of just journalism as well. Is there something that has really surprised you on this path so far that you did not expect would happen?
Honestly, I did not think people would be interested in what I was doing,
You were going to have
to be
one
honest.
listener, and
Yeah.
and it would be your mom.
Honestly, exact 100%, exactly. Or that it would just be one podcast, and it wouldn't turn into the entire platform that we've developed, and doing live shows and things. And honestly, like, I started this last August, so it's not been quite a year yet, and I just can't believe where I've gotten. And but it is a testament, like I'm not gonna lie and be like, oh my gosh, I don't know. I've worked really freaking hard. So I work constantly all the time. I'm still living in my parents' house. I built my studio in my childhood playroom. And my dad and I just glued a bunch of foam that we got from Amazon all over the place. I covered my back pads in like fabric that I got at Walmart, so it's just, you just have to be scrappy. And like I said before, fake it till you make it. And people just really started trusting me, I think, because I got vulnerable and I was honest. And I'm a truly, truly, I just get honest because I just stopped caring what people thought. And that started to resonate with people. The amount of times I get DMs and people will be like, oh my gosh, I listened to this episode, or I watched this this live show you did on Twitch TV, and you helped me come out to my parents, or you helped me go see a therapist, whatever, because I talk about my mental health struggles a lot.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the most important thing, is just being honest and being okay with failing and struggling, and knowing that that's what makes us stronger, and that I'm not going to be as good as that person over here, but I can probably teach them something about what I've been through, and they can teach me something that they've been through. Like, let's all help each other and stop competing.
Yeah, because I mean that's the key thing about doing some of these is you take something away from everybody, and
Right.
I mean that's what I absolutely love about doing
Yeah.
this, is that every cool person you talk to has something that they bring that is enlightening and cool to know.
Exactly. And don't count anybody out. Maybe they might not be, the top person in your industry, but you could probably still learn something from them. The amount of things that I've learned from people who I thought like I would have never talked to in a million years, but I maybe we randomly met because they followed me on Instagram and they messaged me, and now they help me with something, or I went on their podcast or whatever it may be. And so, and they shared some really enlightening information. Like, just don't count anyone out. I just think expanding your circle is so, so important, and being open to learning and new ideas. We are all old dogs. We can all be taught new tricks, no matter your age. But just, you're never too good to keep learning. And I think that that's really what humbled me, is that I thought like, oh, well, I'm not going to go and do like digital stuff. That's so dumb because I'm a traditional journalist. And
Yeah.
no, like, I mean, I got a big piece of humble pie, and it was the best meal I was
Yeah.
ever served because it
Look where
put
it's
me
taken
here.
you.
And I was also, I think that this is part of my mission. My mom, whenever I have conversations with my mom, like, she always says that. She always says, this is what I think this was God's mission for you, was to be that voice for other people. And I totally, totally believe that.
Yeah, very cool. So if there's somebody, I mean, because there are tons of people, I'm sure, who listen to your story and are inspired by it, but also kind of think, how do I make that decision? Whether it's into something very similar to you, but really, if you think about it broadly, about whether it's having the confidence to move forward with something, or just kind of how do you make that first step towards something? Do you have a couple of 2 or 3 hints that you think they should be doing right away if they were going to do that?
I mean, I honestly think it does come down to being ready. Like, if I think about Bridget in 2016, I never could have done this. I'll just be honest. I would not have been
Yeah.
able to do this. I wasn't ready. So I truly believe, even though people always say like there's no better time than now, yeah, that is true. But sometimes it does take us going through times and failing and dealing with difficult relationships, to figure out what we need in life. So be okay with waiting. I think like we need to be a little bit more patient, and understanding that things won't come right away. And if you are going to build something, whether it's starting a business or a podcast, or you're trying to take a leap in your industry and make it digital, whatever it may be, know that that's not going to come easy. You have to be okay with not looking for the fame or the fortune right away. You have to want the bigger picture, and you have to constantly seek that out. And you have to be okay with knowing that people might support you like the first day you launch, but peace out afterwards, because they're not going to come back until, you're in Forbes or whatever it may be. So I think it just comes down to that is patience, and being confident in yourself. And again, like I could not stress this enough. 2016 Bridget would not be right here right now. I was a mess, and so reliant on what other people thought of me, what my friends were doing. I just wasn't focused on the right things in life. And I'm glad that I did go through that time in my life, because it makes me so much more grateful for all the skills that I've developed today. So if you're at that point in your life, don't worry. You probably need to go through that point,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
go through it, get through it. You'll be fine.
You'll be
It's all
fine.
be
That's
okay.
the big thing, right? Is you will get
Exactly.
through it.
You
And,
will.
and I think that's the one thing that is different with your message. A lot of people right away would have said, oh, you need to kind of jump right into this. You need to do A, B, and C. And
Right.
there's lots of people
Right.
that you have other things to do before you get to that.
Right.
And if that's your case, then, you deal with it as it comes. So,
And I wish somebody told me that. I wish somebody did. That is something that really, I think, bothered me, is that I felt so rushed
yeah.
to get to the top or to succeed. And I felt like I was behind constantly, whether it was getting married, having kids, having the perfect job, whatever. And I wish that people told me it was okay to slow down.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, somebody has now to somebody else. So that's
Yeah.
fantastic. So, how do people, how best can they find all of the different things about you, Bridget?
Yeah. So, I mean, Instagram's the best way to reach out and reach me. So you can find me on Instagram at After Orange Slices. And that's also the name of my podcast, which is After Orange Slices. You can find it wherever you listen to podcasts. So wherever you're listening right now, go and search it. And my second podcast is called Turbo Talk. So you can find that wherever. But yeah, Instagram's the best way to reach me right now.
Cool. And we'll make sure that we have that in the show notes as well, and all of those different things, so they can find all the different ways of getting the really cool material that you have out there. Anybody else, if you haven't hit the subscribe button, make sure you do that. Whatever podcast platform you're listening or watching on now, make sure you do that. We have lots of great guests that just continuously come up on this show. So thank you, Bridget, for coming on today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no worries. And make sure that you're listening to her podcast as well, her podcasts, I guess. So because they are pretty awesome. So again, thanks for listening, everybody, or watching, and we'll talk again soon on Big Idea, Big Moves.